Hey, everybody. How is everybody doing today? Apologies. I've been dealing with a couple of technical difficulties today that got me off to a little bit of a slow start. It's great to see everyone. This is Rhonda, your mobility maestro, and I am here once again with Coffee Time, where we share. And as I promised, before I get into that, I would get the background issue fixed. And apparently, the streaming tool that I'm using makes it a little bit difficult to have my coffee settings. So apologies for that. Over the last 6 weeks, though, we're going to jump right in. Over the last weeks, we've talked about clarity, we talked about control, we talked about protection, value, and intelligent automation. Today, we're going to elevate the conversation a little bit because mature mobility environments don't just operate, they lead. And leadership and mobility isn't just about devices, it's about strategic alignment. And so that's what week 7 is all about. It's about strategic alignment. So, as I always say, my goal and my job here is to just make it make sense. Let's jump right in. Sips up. So, we'll go ahead into the first slide here. Enterprise mobility, strategic leadership at scale is what we're going to be talking about today. As I mentioned, from managed environment to performance engine, that's what we want to shift from. So we're not just managing our environment, but this is a performance engine. And that shift is where mobility has quietly become infrastructure. And that is what we're looking to do here. It touches on revenue continuity, it impacts workforce productivity, it shapes compliance posture, and it affects operational resilience. Yet, in many organizations, it's still treated as operational. Strategic organizations treat mobility and leadership as operational, right? And this is what we're talking about here. And because they treat it as operational, that's where they run into the issues that they run into. Strategic organizations need to start treating mobility, or strategic organizations treat mobility as a leadership variable. I'm sorry, guys, I'm thrown off by my technical difficulties and it's got me rambling a bit. So again, many organizations still treat it as operational, but strategic organizations treat mobility as a leadership variable, and that does change everything. And as I mentioned, it impacts the workforce productivity, it shapes compliance posture, it affects operational resilience. And then we're going to go ahead and click over to our next slide. I will jump in a little bit there so you can see me. So it's not such a bore to you. So mobility is now a leadership variable, right? So mobility isn't inventory anymore. No executive reporting cadence. This is where strategic oversight breaks down, right? No executive reporting cadence where mobility performance is invisible to at the leadership level. It just is not inventory anymore. It's diffused ownership across departments. So you got accountability gaps, which create unmanaged risk exposure. And this is something that we can fix by being more strategic and not allowing that breakdown. And then third, when it breaks down, there are no defined performance KPIs, and that's important. Key performing indicators tells you what works, and once you know what activity works, you know if that activity is or isn't being performed, right? So without a measurement, there's no meaningful governance, and that is really, really important. Um, Let me just go. So after more than 15 years in the industry, here's what I've observed. There are two types of organizations: those reacting to mobility complexity and those structuring mobility for performance. The difference: executive alignment, clear ownership, and defined KPIs. That's the difference. That's leadership. And that's where we're talking today, right? And so we've talked a little bit about strategic oversight and how it breaks down, right? So it typically happens in those three places that I showed you on the previous slide. There's no executive reporting cadence. There's ownership is diffused, and there's no KPIs that exist, right? So the cost isn't tracked and performance isn't tracked, right? So when those gaps exist, drift overflows. And we've been talking about drift for several weeks now. When those are corrected, performance stabilizes. And we'll skip right to the next slide. The next slide is about the performance engine model, right? So you've got executive visibility, defined governance, and measurable KPIs. Visibility means dashboards, not just invoices, right? So what this is strategic ability environments that operate on three pillars, and those three pillars are the ones that I just mentioned. So what each one is: visibility means dashboards and not just invoices. Governance means formal ownership and not assumptions. And KPIs mean mobility is measured against business outcomes and not just spend. Again, what are those key performing indicators, and how do you make sure that that is happening every time? And that's what transforms mobility from managed into leverage. And that's where we want to help take your organization if it's not already there. And that's to strategically leverage mobility, or managed in terms of how you're managing it is strategically leveraged, right? And so across our engagements, DMI has helped organizations realize over $36.3 million in savings in the last 36 months. Actually, it's in the last 24 months, $36.3 million in savings. That doesn't happen from reactive oversight. It happens from structured leadership. And here's what we consistently see. Most enterprise environments uncover between 8 and 15% optimization opportunity once governance, reporting cadence, and performance metrics are properly aligned. Okay? And that is not high. That is what happens when you properly align and you ensure that you're not overspending and you're optimizing your account. Not because things are broken. That's not why it's not happening. Again, I always say this every week, not necessarily because things are broken. It's because when you begin to scale, complexity compounds quietly at scale. And so, and I've mentioned this several weeks ago or over this last few weeks, is that many companies have looked to uh, the solution as just throwing bodies at it, right? And companies understand now with intelligence that there is no reason to continue to throw bodies at it when there is intelligent automation available to you. And that's what we bring to the table here at DMI, an opportunity for intelligent automation. So again, that's a shift forward, right? So if today's conversation resonates, I'm opening 5 executive mobility strategic brief sessions this month. It's not a demo, as I mentioned, because I'd opened this for you guys before. It's not a demo. It does fill up quick. It's not a generic assessment. It's a focused 15-minute executive pressure test. And in it, we evaluate your leadership alignment, your governance structure, and your KPI maturity all around managed mobility. And we also look at the executive visibility strength, right? As I mentioned, these slots do fill up fast because they're a great opportunity at no cost. So it is complimentary for you to take a look at your environment and pressure test it. By the end of that session, you're going to know clearly whether mobility is functioning as a cost center or as a performance engine. If you'd like one of the 5 sessions, message me directly after this live, or you can comment you can place in the comments that you'd want, to participate in the session, and we'll do that. Also in the comments, feel free to also place in the comments that you'd like a copy of our 2026 State of Mobility Managed Services. It's a playbook that's chock full of great information. All of these coffee timelines, at least for this first 8 weeks, are based on that playbook. I'm happy to get you a complimentary copy of that. So again, you can measure your business against what's good, what's better, and what's great, right? And so that's what it's going to give you an opportunity to do here. So real quick, just looking back at that performance engine model, is executive visibility, is defined governance, and it's measurable KPIs, right? So we're going to go from managed to strategically led, like we spoke about. We're not going to have reactive oversight. We're going to have some operational reporting. We're going to be costing tracking our costs. We're going to have strategic alignment, performance dashboards, and value creation. You'll see a QR code there on the screen. Feel free to just jump on my calendar so we can talk about how things are going for you. But again, this is a great opportunity for you guys to look at a pressure test for your organization. 15 minutes, we'll talk through it. And of course, that won't be the end of it, but that's just the beginning. A quick 15-minute pressure test. And from there, we deep dive and go further if necessary. Perhaps it's not necessary and we won't need to do that. But again, drop in the comments that you're interested in looking at that, or you can always DM me later, scan the QR code, and get on my calendar. So, like I said, and I always say, clarity builds confidence, right? Control builds defensibility. Protection ensures stability, and value creates advantage. Automation protects momentum, intelligence accelerates it, and leadership activates it. So we've been building on this, right? We started with clarity builds confidence. Then we went to control builds defensibility. Then protection ensuring stability, value creating advantage, automation protecting momentum, intelligence accelerating it, and leadership activating it. So that's where we are. It's time to activate, guys. Mobility, as I mentioned before, should not be reactive. It should be strategic. So let's elevate it. As I always say, my goal has always been very simple. We're going to use a quick 15 minutes with these coffee time chats to make it make sense, to talk about what mobility is or should be looking like. And as we forward look at the changes in mobility over time in terms of mobility management, there's not one large organization out there today that does not have a mobility environment that is becoming more and more complex. And that is why we're here, to make sure that we can help you guys with that. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today. As you know, you can always jump on my calendar. You can comment in the comments here anything you'd like to know. You can also DM me to get on my calendar, or to just engage in conversation. I love this type of conversation and I'm happy to do it. So once again, I've hit my goal, 15 minutes, and we're out of here. Thank you so much for your time, and sips up. Have a wonderful rest of your day.